Now today we got to look at the Haitian Revolution of 1791 to 1804. Haiti was formerly known as the French colony of Saint-Domingue in the Caribbean, and it was a very profitable French colony, very wealthy. But the people making all the wealth were the white French planters, and the slave population was, doing all the labor and being oppressed considerably. So we're going to look today at kind of how this revolution starts, how it gets its momentum, and kind of where it takes Haiti, modern-day Haiti. The ideas of the Enlightenment we're going to look at again, of equality and liberty, freedom for all, God-given rights, and all those things that have kind of influenced the American Revolution, the French Revolution, which we've already talked about, and then the Haitian Revolution. So again, the ideas of the Enlightenment and kind of what those ideas stand for, again, are really dictating politics of the age. So we're going to take a look at that as well. Now, if you look at the map here, we can get the location of where Haiti is, modern-day Haiti. So it's in the Caribbean, south of where you guys are located right now, here in Florida. And at the time, in the 1700s, it was known as the Queen of the Antilles because it was so incredibly wealthy. So we're going to have a few wealthy French planters making a tremendous amount of money on slave labor, most notably through the production of sugar. Now, Haiti's also going to be the climate's going to be very conducive to other cash crops as well, but the wealth created is going to be very one-sided. It's not going to be equally distributed when we're looking at it. So just so you get an idea of the location. And on the right there you can see the area that is modern-day Haiti, the former colony of Saint-Domingue. It kind of takes up like a third of the island of Hispaniola, sharing it with modern-day Dominican Republic. By 1770, we've got a number of, as I mentioned earlier, cash crops coming out of Haiti. Sugar, coffee, indigo, cotton, and the climate's very conducive to a lot of these kinds of crops. But by 1770, we're going to have 121 million pounds of sugar being exported every year out of Saint-Domingue. And sugar is a very profitable crop. There's a lot of demand for it in Europe and in the Americas. It's used to make rum and molasses. It's is used a lot in the international trade of the time. But sugar is a very labor-intensive crop. You can see over there on the right the sugar cane being grown. It requires a lot of labor to harvest. You got to go out in the fields, these sugarcane fields, with machetes, cut the sugarcane, cut the leaves off, collect as much as you can. Then you got to take all the sugarcane itself to a sugar mill where it's cut up a little bit more, cooked, and further processed. So the end result is kind of a raw sugar that you see at the bottom right, kind of brown in color. But sugar of the day was actually, the finished product will actually come out in big sugar loaves that you would have to cut up yourself and snip big pieces of sugar from. So it wasn't like granulated modern day sugar. But again, the demand was still very great that people were willing to import a lot of African slaves to make money by growing it. So what you're going to have here in Saint-Domingue are a handful of French planters owning the lands and the means of production and the agricultural lands and crops, and they're going to make a tremendous amount of money from this. But again, it's going to be built on slave labor, which they don't have to pay their slaves, so that's just more money that they're making. But these French planters that are successful in sugar production in Haiti at this time actually become some of the wealthiest people on the planet during this time. It's a tremendous amount of wealth that they made. The conditions for the slaves in Saint-Domingue in the 1790s were so horrible and terrible that the turnover population was very, very high. They would import slaves from West Africa, and they were expected to survive maybe 2 or 3 years max. They were expected that the slaves were going to be worked to death, that they were going to be mistreated, beaten, that disease was going to wipe out a number of them, starvation, malnutrition. So a slave owner in Saint-Domingue understood that you needed to purchase X amount of slaves a year to keep production high. So by the time you get to 1790, you're going to have the planters of Saint-Domingue importing about 40,000 slaves a year into Haiti or Saint-Domingue. So it's a tremendous amount of turnover and death occurring with these particular African slaves being brought in. Now, when we look at slave populations elsewhere in the Caribbean or in the American South, conditions were better in comparison, and the slaves were not dying off as much. So the culture of the slaves in the southern United States became less African and more of a unique African American culture, which kind of grew into its own things over time. However, the turnover of the African slaves into Haiti was so great that the African culture remained within these slaves. Their language kind of remained African. Their religion remained African. So it was unique in that sense. But in society of Saint-Domingue, the way it's going to be broken down as far as population goes, when we get to 1790, we have a population that has about 500,000 slaves, people enslaved. You're going to have about 32,000 white planters, people that own everything, based most of the production and land on the island. And then you get the gens de couleur, which are free people of color, and they number about 28,000. That's the mixed race population. A lot of the gens de couleur were free, educated, but they were still kind of treated as second-class citizens. So, it's going to be the gens de couleur that are going to be pushing initially for change in Haiti because, again, they are you could call them the bourgeoisie of Haiti. But, again, the conditions were not very good, and it was just a matter of time before this is all going to boil over. So when we get to 1789, things are going well for the white French planters in Haiti and Saint-Domingue. Again, we got 40,000 slaves being imported a year, and if you can see from the chart, guys, that's how far that is up from, a couple decades prior. So, we see a lot of this economic drive for this large amount of slaves being imported from Africa. One of the other things we got to look at here in 1789, guys, is that the French Revolution breaks out. What you're going to have are these enlightened ideas that kind of bring about the French Revolution and change in France. You're going to have the French planters in Saint-Domingue being very worried that ideas of revolution and change and equality for everyone and democracy might trickle over into Saint-Domingue. So a lot of these French planters wanted to keep the French Revolution a secret from their slaves. That was a big reason that a lot of the planters would keep their slaves ignorant to a lot of what was going around them, not allow them to learn how to read, not allow them to really communicate with other slaves from other properties. So you're going to have them, to the best of their ability, trying to keep this whole thing quiet. But again, this kind of society that has wealth built on slavery, is only a matter of time before it completely erupts and changes the whole society altogether. However much the French planters tried to keep the ideas of the French Revolution a secret, a lot of it's going to trickle out and get into the slave populations through word of mouth and what have you. So basically what you're also going to have is a number of slaves escaping and kind of running off into the woods, basically, living off in the woods. And a lot of them would gather together, and at occasion they would attack white planters. But nothing was really organized. Then you're going to have a guy by the name of Dadi Bukaman, who is a voodoo priest, kind of be the one that's responsible for organizing the uprising. At a voodoo ceremony, it's agreed on that like a couple days before August 21st that an attack will take place. That this attack will take place on August 21st. And that everybody has to keep it a secret. All the slaves that were involved have to keep it absolutely secret, not talk about it to anyone. So for the next week or so, these slaves would go back to their plantation, work among their white masters, all the while knowing that on the 21st of August, they're going to all at once rise up in this massive slave revolt. So on the night of August 21st, all of a sudden, the slaves turn on the white masters. Slaves go into white white houses, murdering the families, women, children. So it's kind of really traumatic, if you would, for a lot of these French planters who, to some degree, had to have trusted the slaves to help with their children and take care of them. And then next day they were killing everyone, turning on them. So it was pretty crazy, but again, to be expected in this kind of society where these people had been enslaved for so long. So you're also going to have the white planters were pretty much ready for this. They knew they were outnumbered, and they feared a slave uprising. To them, that was the most terrifying thing. So a lot of the white planters were ready for this to happen and were pretty well armed. So the whites that are on the island actually get themselves into fortified towns and forts around Haiti to ward off the attack by the slaves. But the slaves are very successful in just confining the whites to certain areas. And then they go about, once the whites were confined to certain areas, the slaves went about burning sugar mills and burning the white planter houses and just setting everything on fire, everything that had represented their enslavement. So it's going to be a pretty quick uprising. And again, the rest of the world doesn't want this to get out. The Americans don't want the slaves in the southern United States to know about what was going on in Haiti, and the British didn't want slaves on other islands to know about the slave uprising in Haiti. So it was something that a lot of these people wanted to keep quiet. But when it's all said and done, we're gonna have about 4,000 whites killed in a 2-month time period. So it's all the slaves taking revenge for centuries of enslavement. Now, after the initial uprising in 1791, you're going to have the slaves that are taking place in this uprising kind of organize their leadership a little bit better, organize their troops and what have you. So the leader that really kind of stands out at this time is Toussaint Louverture, oftentimes considered the Black George Washington, for his leadership during the Haitian Revolution at this time. Toussaint is an educated former slave, one of the rare examples in SAINT-DOMINGUE of a slave kind of being treated well by his master. And he's a very eloquent speaker and writer, and he's very successful in leading the Haitian rebels on the field, basically organizing them into an effective military force. So he had a mind for that kind of military leadership. But what we're going to have here, we have to look at the greater scheme of things. If we look at what's going on in France at this time, the French Revolution is now getting into its more radical phase. Maximilien Robespierre is gaining momentum in Paris, and you have the foundation also of the First French Republic. And now you're going to have the more radical factions in France, who again were influenced by the Enlightenment. They're going to push for the abolition of slavery in all of French colonies. So the new French Republic makes slavery illegal and frees all the slaves in former colonies. So this is a big move for the Haitian Revolution here. We're going to have the slaves really benefiting from the French Revolution at this time. So the French did this for a number of reasons. A lot of them truly believed in it, that slavery was wrong, and if you were an enlightened individual and trying to create an enlightened republic, you couldn't have it being built on the backs of slaves. But it also put the French at this time, who were fighting a lot of people in Europe, a lot of like the English and the Prussians, it really put their revolutionary movement on a higher moral ground than anybody else's. But obviously it's going to be working out well for the Haitians. So even though they were freed within the French government's eyes for a brief time there, during the 1790s, you're going to see a lot of continued fighting amongst the rebellious slaves and the white French population on the island. Now the French planters on the island were fed up with the revolutionary government in France, and they're eventually going to ask the British to come and help them put down the slave rebellion. So basically the Haitian Revolution becomes a theater a sideshow kind of what's going on in the grander scheme of the French Revolution, if you would, and kind of this idea of a Eurocentric movement of history. So it's kind of interesting to look at that. But throughout the 1790s, we're going to have continued insurrection in fighting going back and forth between the two sides. Now, as we talked about in the French Revolution recording a couple days ago, you have what's known as the Thermidorian reaction. And kind of, you get to the point in the French Revolution where it becomes less radical. People want stability. You have the formation of the Directory and eventually the rise of Napoleon. And what you're going to have is Napoleon kind of saying, or at least declaring, that he is the revolution and it's over, basically. So Napoleon goes back on a lot of the things that the First French Republic had done, most notably the abolition of slaves around the French colonies. So Napoleon reinstitutes slavery. In one way, one thing he's also got to do is bring Saint-Domingue under his control again, because in the early 1800s, Napoleon is at the top of his game, and he has this whole idea that he's not just going to have a European empire, but an American one as well. So he's got to take back Haiti, and he's got to maintain control in North America for sure. So what we're going to have here is French troops being sent to Haiti to put down the Haitian Revolution, basically. So some 40,000 French troops go to Haiti, and it's going to go back and forth again. But for a brief time period, the French are going to be pretty successful in kind of bringing Saint-Domingue back under its control. Now they have to deal with Toussaint as well, so they hatch a plan to bring Toussaint in kind of under a flag of truce to negotiate certain terms. When Toussaint shows up, he's arrested on the spot and taken back to France as a prisoner, basically as a guy leading this rebellion, not as an actual leader. So he's treated as just a common criminal and taken back to France, where he can't even really get a meeting with Napoleon. They throw the Haitian leader in jail in a dungeon, and he's basically going to die from neglect and exposure in a freezing cell in France. So Toussaint really becomes a hero at this time to the Haitian people. He's looked at as this kind of, again, George Washington for Haiti. One thing we got to look at is that Toussaint did do is he drafts a constitution in 1801 before he's captured. This constitution basically says that there's no slavery in Saint-Domingue anymore, and grants this idea of equality for all Saint-Domingue citizens. One downside to this 1801 constitution, though, is that it makes Toussaint head of the government for life. So it's not a very democratic move by Toussaint, and a lot of historians don't really know why he did this, because he really didn't have to. But it's the beginning of this idea that Haiti, in theory, wants a republic. They want freedom, but it's this long road to actually achieve it that we're going to continue to see throughout its history. After Toussaint is taken prisoner and later dies in France, Napoleon is briefly successful in taking over a large portion of Saint-Domingue again under his control. However, he's going to, by this time, have bigger pressing issues in Europe with some of the enemies that he's fighting in Europe. So it's going global for one thing. He's fighting the British in Haiti now. He's fighting the rebellious slave rebellion still. And it's really going to start taking its toll on the French forces in Saint-Domingue. Yellow fever is also another major killer carried by mosquitoes. This is going to wipe out a large portion of the French forces in Saint-Domingue. But basically what we're going to have here is Napoleon having to deal with issues in Europe and issues in Saint-Domingue. In 1803, we're going to have Napoleon selling the Louisiana Territory to the United States, mostly because he needed the money, to continue war against his enemies in Europe. So we think that most historians believe that Napoleon got to the point where he was trying to cut his losses in North America. He at one time had a vision of a Western Hemisphere empire, but that had to be put on the back burner. His priority now was maintaining control of his European empire. So basically you're going to have what we call the Battle of Vertières, in which the French suffer a decisive defeat from the Haitian rebels, and Napoleon's going to decide to, again, cut his losses and pull out of the Western Hemisphere. So that's kind of a real big turning point in the Haitian Revolution, when we had the French finally packing up and going home. In 1804, independence is officially declared, and you get for the first time the name Haiti being used rather than Saint-Domingue. Haiti is the old native Tiano word for the island, so they thought it was a kind of a fitting name for it. So again, the Haitians really, by this time you had the first Haitian Republic being declared here in 1804, have it in their head that this is going to be a new democratic utopia for Africans, freed slaves. So people have high enlightened hopes for this new republic. But we're going to see here that that's not going to necessarily be how this is going to work out. The other guy in charge here that we got to look at is Dessalines. He was Toussaint's second in command when Toussaint was around, and now Dessalines is going to be a major political figure here in Haiti at the time. So this whole democratic idea that we get here with Haiti being formed kind of sours by the time you get to September of 1804. A couple months later, you're going to have Dessalines declaring himself Emperor of Haiti. So this is not too much not a very democratic move for him. But Dessalines tended to have more of a despotic tendencies than Toussaint. Dessalines comes from a slave background as well, but unlike Toussaint, he was very much so mistreated by his master, oftentimes showing off his scars that he had acquired from being whipped into doing what he was told to do. So he was very bitter and tended to lean to be more despotic when it came to what he was trying to get out of Haiti and what he wanted Haiti to be. Like most revolutions throughout history, the people that run the revolution, that are leaders of the revolution, have this fear that it is going to be contested, that there are going to be enough people that are going to be against their revolution that it's going to stop their revolution. So basically, revolutionaries always fear counter-revolution. So that's what we're going to have here with Dessalines in 1804. He's going to put it out to his military commanders that they need to go to different towns throughout Haiti, and they need to find the white population living in these towns and kill them on the spot. So Dessalines is going to actually issue these orders, and then he's going to catch down wind that a lot of it's not being carried out, that his military officers are not going after the white population. So he actually personally himself would go to these towns and make sure that these orders were being carried out, that the white population was being killed. So basically, he declares that initially all men within the towns be killed, but what we're going to have is men, women, and children being kind of indiscriminately massacred here in 1804. So a lot of these, or most of the whites that were targeted, were French planters. White foreigners like Americans or British or the few Poles and Germans that were on the island were not necessarily targeted. So he was just looking for, basically, if you were white and spoke French. So by the time it's all said and done, after a couple months of this going on, about 5,000 are killed. Dessalines even targets the whites that were sympathetic to the slaves. So it's kind of an indiscriminate killing of the white population in Haiti at the time. Now, this kind of is the foundation for the Haitian Republic. So we could see how the rest of the history of the country is going to really go, even to the present day. It's kind of they just have a different way of doing things in Haiti, historically. Now, Dessalines, as I stated in the previous slide, has already declared himself Emperor of Haiti, and he's going to go on being Emperor until about 1806, when he's assassinated by members in his military. According to most accounts, Dessalines was about to go put down a rebellion, and he got on his horse in Port-au-Prince when he was shot at twice and only hit once. Then the military guards who were trying to kill him took out their saber, split his head open with the saber, and then stabbed him a couple more times with a dagger. Then, according to one account, the mob that was watching all this basically declared that the tyrant was dead, and then they all just desecrated his body, mutilating it and tearing it apart. So this is kind of a trend that we see here with Haitian leaders all throughout the 1800s into the early 20th century. Oftentimes their rule kind of ends in a violent way, through assassination or with a coup d'etat. So rarely in Haitian history do we see truly a peaceful transition of power take place. Now, one thing we got to look at is that the Haitian Revolution is really going to influence other Latin American countries to rebel against their European overseers. So we have a domino effect basically taking place in the Western Hemisphere, starting with the American Revolution, then the Haitian Revolution, and then going on to all the revolutions against the Spanish in South America. So it really, these enlightened ideas that freedom, equality, liberty, fraternity are all really influential in basically spreading these revolutionary ideas. But one kind of lasting effect that we see from this Haitian Revolution and all the violence and bloodshed that we just talked about really is that it kind of creates this political instability in Haiti that's still an issue today. Oftentimes only interrupted very briefly by very strong and despotic leaders like Dessalines and Papa Doc on the right there. So it seems to be one extreme or the other, either a despotic leader or political chaos, like you had in 1991 with the coup of 1991. So it's still something Haiti is dealing with today, especially after the 2010 earthquake. So it's really hard for the country to organize itself into a modern day republic, if you would. So we still see these effects of the Haitian Revolution today in what we see with the Haitian leadership and where Haiti is in the world.